back to winning isn't easy. What disability insurance companies don't get about the difference between fibromyalgia and rheumatoid arthritis. Now, fibro and rheumatoid arthritis, RA, cause similar symptoms, but they're unrelated and they are different medical conditions. Each can be disabling on its own, and both can be disabling in combination. Medical research shows that RA can increase a person's likelihood of having fibromyalgia, and people can have both conditions at the same time. Yet, disability carriers don't understand the different causes, the different diagnostic methods, the different treatments, and they just tend to disregard the unique causes, diagnostic methods, and treatment for fibromyalgia and for rheumatoid arthritis. They kind of lump them into a big pot called subjective medical conditions. They don't take the time to differentiate them. Now, let's talk about different causes. Fibromyalgia is a chronic neurological condition that causes amplified body pain. That can result in cognitive dysfunction, depression, and fatigue. On the other hand, rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune condition, and that can cause damages to the synovial tissue lining your joints, for example, in your fingers or your hips or your knees. That in turn can lead to inflammation and pain. RA can often cause permanent damage to the bones and to the connective tissues that can result in bony deformity of the impacted joints. Now, there are different and there are shared symptoms. Let's talk about that. The common symptoms of fibromyalgia can include body-wide pain, including the torso, the thighs, the buttocks, the arms, the back, the neck, even the head. There are also some specific spots of intense pain, and these are known as trigger points. There are also gastroenterological problems, including constipation, diarrhea. There's even dizziness. There are headaches. There are sleep disorders associated with this. And of course, there's that chronic fatigue and problems with concentration. Now, let's talk about the common symptoms of RA. The common symptoms of RA include joint pain, joint tenderness, joint swelling, joint inflammation, joint stiffness, loss of range of motion, for example, in the fingers or in the shoulders, joint deformity. Now, RA can occur either in one location or in multiple locations across your body, primarily, as I normally see, in the hands, the fingers, the knuckles, the wrists, the elbows, the shoulders, the hips, knees, sometimes ankles and toes. RA is characterized by symmetrical symptoms, and that can occur on both sides of the body. However, the symptoms can progress at different rates, and the severity of the pain can also vary, and it's not symmetrical. What are the shared symptoms? And those shared symptoms can obviously make it difficult for the disability carrier to figure out what the disabling medical condition might be. So RA and fibromyalgia have shared symptoms. There's pain on both sides of the body. There's pain in various parts of the body. There's morning stiffness. There's reduced mobility and range of motion of the joints. There's stiffness that's worse in the morning or after periods of rest. There's cognitive impairment. And secondary to pain, there's generally chronic fatigue. So while you might not be able to differentiate between the diagnosis of RA and fibromyalgia, I think it's important that you're describing your symptoms to your physician and how those symptoms impact your ability to function. Now, in my view, the disability carrier should be parsing this. They should be looking at each diagnosis separately and then in combination to decide whether or not you meet the applicable standard of disability in your policy or plan. They just tend to lump it all in one big pot. I don't think that's the right way to do it. Let's talk about diagnosis. As a rule, it is more difficult to diagnose fibromyalgia than RA because there's no gold standard test to determine whether or not you have fibromyalgia. The diagnosis of fibromyalgia is a bit of a diagnosis of exclusion. The American College of Rheumatology has diagnostic criteria for fibromyalgia, and that in part can include widespread body pain. And there's something they use called the symptom severity scale. They want to see that the symptomatology has been at the same level for at least 3 months, and there's no evidence of any other disorder that would explain your pain. On the other hand, RA is based on a physical exam, the medical history, blood work, and imaging testing. Now, the disability carrier will normally review your medical records closely, and it's not uncommon for the carrier to attack the diagnosis of fibromyalgia and rheumatoid arthritis. Why? Because the diagnostic criteria rely in part on the self-report of you. And if they're looking for a reason to deny the claim, they're going to deny the lack of objective testings or finding on physical examination. They're going to argue that your complaints are inconsistent with your activity of daily living or is inconsistent with surveillance. And so that's what they're looking for in terms of attacking the fibromyalgia case. It's lack of diagnosis, lack of meeting the criteria with the tender points, that sort of thing, the reliance of your physician on your subjective complaints, inconsistent or inconclusive physical examination findings, and the inconsistency between your complaints of pain or fatigue and your reported or observed activity. So let's contrast that with rheumatoid arthritis. There, the disability carrier is going to be attacking the results of the blood testing. Now, many people with RA have signs of inflammation in certain body antibodies on testing. Sometimes the testing can be negative, notwithstanding the objective physical examination finding, which is consistent with RA. So the disability carrier is going to seize on the negative blood testing to deny the claim, or they're going to argue that the testing was inconclusive, or sometimes I see the argument that the testing that was used just isn't reliable, isn't valid. Those are all some of the games that they're going to play with the diagnosis. I think it's really important that your doctor is documenting the physical exam findings, the blood work, diagnostic studies, and explain how they arrived. What was their thinking in terms of how they got to this diagnosis? Now, again, disability carriers think that blood work is the gold standard for the diagnosis of RA. So you've got to explain that if your testing is negative or equivocal. How about treatment for fibromyalgia and rheumatoid arthritis? They're going to expect that you got care from a rheumatologist, and they're going to poo-poo home remedies and natural treatments. They are going to argue that the nature of the care that you're getting is inconsistent with the policy requirements and that you haven't gotten reasonable or necessary medical care at the level at which comports with your complaints. Now, obviously, the medication for both conditions is designed to reduce pain. But in RA, you're getting medication to reduce the inflammation and slow the progression of RA. So regardless of the nature of the treatment, your medical record should be documenting your treatment, your response to the treatment, and any side effects of the treatment. It should be helpful, really helpful, if the doctor can parse the treatment you're getting for each condition if you've got both. Often these claims are denied in part because of the diagnosis, the lack of symptoms or physical exam findings, and the lack of appropriate treatment. So what should you do if your claim has been denied? I think that you have got to hire an experienced ERISA disability attorney immediately. You're only going to have 180 days in which to file an appeal. And as I've said, we've gone through the laundry list of reasons why claims are denied. And we need to make sure that we are getting the carrier file, figuring out all of the reasons why the claim has been denied, contacting your doctor, getting the necessary medical support or rebutting the opinions of the carrier or plan's doctors, if necessary, getting our own IME, if necessary, getting a functional capacity evaluation. So you can see that we've got a factual attack, a medical attack, and obviously that needs to be combined with the necessary legal arguments. In my situation, my appeal letters are 25 to 65 pages long because that is the trial of your case. In an ERISA disability case, once the appeal process has ended, you can't add any new evidence. You don't get your day in court. You can't add new things in. The judge is stuck looking at that record. The record is your carrier's file at the time of the last denial. Now, the other thing you need to understand is that sometimes carriers will apply what's called a subjective medical condition limitation, if that's in your policy or plan. That clause lets the carrier plan legally limit the payment of benefits to just 2 years if it's caused by a subjective medical condition. It's not uncommon for the possible listed laundry list to include fibromyalgia, and sometimes I'll even see arthritis. Obviously, if your policy or plan and your carrier ultimately denies or terminates your benefits or applies an objective medical condition limitation, it's really time to call an experienced ERISA disability attorney. We need to look at that policy or plan and see whether the medical condition you have, fibromyalgia or RA, is really a listed condition. And if it's not, then that's an attack. If you've got fibromyalgia and RA, then the issue is going to be, well, is the RA excluded as a subjective medical condition? And if so, obviously you got a problem. But if not, then the argument is going to be that you're disabled because of the RA. And that's going to take additional medical proof. Sounds complicated? It is. I want you to be thinking about that while we take a break.